Princess Anne stepped out from Windsor Castle at exactly 11:22 that morning. Her expression was one that people close to her knew right away, as a mask over deep sorrow held firmly in check. The urgent gathering of family members she had just attended stretched on for 4 full hours and wrapped up with a choice so painful that even and, well known for keeping her feelings tightly controlled, found it hard to stay steady. The words she was preparing to share would alter the course of the royal household in ways that could never be undone. This was a gathering that no one had ever imagined would take place. The summons came quietly, reaching only a select few through secure channels designed specifically for times when normal procedures fell apart. Anyone who saw it knew the style at once. There was no title in the message, no explanation provided, no gentle wording to ease the blow, just a clear and direct order. They needed to be at Windsor as early as possible after sunrise. There was no reason to question the cause, yet as the first light appeared in the east, cars were already heading there along quiet routes and guarded gates that most maps never showed. The arrivals happened one by one, spaced out on purpose, with no convoys or obvious protection teams. This approach was not about keeping up appearances. It was about maintaining strict oversight. Princess Anne walked into the conference room ahead of everyone else, bringing nothing with her and not making any phone calls. She skipped looking over any documents since she had requested none in advance. At this point, what she needed was not background details but a unified understanding. She settled into her chair at the extended table without any fuss and simply waited. King Charles III came in shortly after. His face showed tiredness more than shock, the appearance of a person who had passed the night carefully taking in facts instead of responding impulsively. He stopped for a second at the entrance, scanning the space as though gauging if it could contain the weight of the topics ahead. Then he took his place, putting aside the typical signs of rank to focus on the matter at hand. Prince William entered last of all. He showed up alone, without assistance, without any binders, without the usual preparations that marked his typical duties. On this day, his being there held a heavier significance. He was not present merely to watch or learn. He was involved because the issues directly affected what came next. What stood out just as much was what stayed away. No media experts were on hand to craft wording. No lawyers were ready to point out potential problems. No assistants lingered nearby in case quick directions were required. The area had been cleared of anything that could dilute or alter the talk. This was not a session focused on handling fallout. It was one centered on facing hard realities. The room's setup drove that point home. The drapes were pulled shut not to hide from view, but to sharpen concentration. The surface of the table was empty. There were no pitchers of water, no documents stacked neatly, no prepared materials laid out. Every element of ease had been removed on purpose. The unspoken signal was clear. This conversation was not intended to drag on. For a short while, nobody said a word. That quiet period was not about uncertainty. It was about adjusting as each individual realized they had stepped outside the normal ways of making choices in the palace. The standard steps of exploring possibilities, putting things off, making tweaks, and controlling releases had already run their course in other settings. All that was left now was to decide. The details that led to this assembly had come in the night before, sent through official pathways that allowed no misreading. It skipped layers of staff and avoided any tentative phrasing. It arrived straight away, backed by papers that shut off options instead of creating them. This was not a warning. It was a final determination. King Charles ended the quiet with a straightforward question that held no defensiveness or planning behind it. He asked if keeping quiet was still a viable path. Not if it would be better or easier or recommended, but if it could be done without serious fallout. There was no need for discussion on the reply. It was obvious from the expressions across the table. Princess Anne replied first, though she presented it simply as a fact rather than an order. She explained directly that holding back had already started to create harm. What used to be careful privacy had turned into misleading silence just by continuing. The organization, she pointed out, now faced danger not from the events themselves, but from how long they had been kept separate from what people knew. Prince William paid close attention, concentrating on the way the points were laid out rather than who was speaking. He grasped that the importance of this session came not just from the details, but from when it was happening. Any choice made here would set an example for dealing with facts that could no longer be molded. As they went over the specifics, the core issue became sharper. This was not something that could fade away unnoticed. It would not fix itself with more time. The effects reached past personal matters into the framework of duties and succession. Everyone there saw that the real question was not if the facts would come out, but how twisted they might get if the family did not claim them first. The more they waited to share, the less control they would have over the story. Princess, and highlighted that danger with her usual straightforwardness. She pointed out to the others that records of the past seldom criticized groups for dealing with hardship. They criticized them for dodging it. In times like these, she explained, trust was not kept through careful steps, but through straightforwardness. No one pushed back, but a clear change happened. They all accepted that the methods the family had used for years were not enough for what was coming. This could not be handled with slow releases or planned comforting words. Prince William's body language shifted a bit as the talk went on. He stopped just taking in details. He started thinking ahead to what would follow. He knew the choices in this room would speed up his own shift in ways that no training could ease. By the end of the discussion, the gathering had transformed. What started as an emergency call had turned into a defining point for the organization. They were not figuring out next steps anymore. They were choosing how they wanted to be viewed when the facts came out. One issue still hung in the air, not if they would admit it, but who could say it without illusion, protection, or redirection. The response did not have to be spoken. Nearly everyone in the room looked toward Princess, and the boundary that would not be moved. Princess, and took more time than expected to respond. She let the quiet build, not from doubt, but from purpose. In that interval, the atmosphere adjusted. The rush that brought them there shifted to something stricter. Full focus. When she began, there was no introduction. She did not go over previous points or note how serious it was. She talked instead about the approach they had used so far. The family, she said clearly, had used up the value of handling things carefully. Whatever this situation started as, it was not about logistics or image anymore. It had entered ethical ground, and ethics did not bend to plans. Her influence was not forced. It was accepted naturally. Years of dedicated work had placed her in a unique spot in the family, based not on warmth or intimidation, but dependability. She was respected for steadiness rather than convincing others. When she stepped in, it was clear she did so only when waiting itself had turned into a choice, and she described the limited options with exact accuracy. The family had two paths left. They could share with precision and care, or they could let the facts come out in pieces controlled by people with less knowledge and no limits. There was no other way. Time, she stressed, was not neutral anymore. It was steadily wearing away trust. King Charles paid attention without breaking in. People there saw there was no pushback. In the early part of his time as king, he often considered choices against past examples, preferring small steps when he could. Now, there was no room for that. His calm indicated not uncertainty, but acceptance. Things had moved past where careful moves still helped, and directed her words to Prince William not as guidance, but as part of the group. She talked to him as someone whose path ahead would be directly affected by the next actions. The organization, she noted, could endure hardship. What it could not endure was the idea that it shied away from facts when they became difficult. The effects of such times lasted much longer than the times themselves. This new way of looking at it changed the feel in the room. The talk shifted from handling effects to owning duties, and she clarified that the aim was not to shield the family from unease. It was to guard the organization from decay. The key change happened when she set limits on what could be shared openly. The words she demanded must not downplay the truth. They must not hint that results were still open when they were not. And they must not indicate that talks were still happening. If decisions were already made, any of those would be misleading, even if not meant that way. Her straightforwardness broke through the remaining urge to protect by leaving things out. She presented sharing not as vulnerability, but as careful oversight. The monarchy, she explained, had never lasted by acting as if problems did not touch it. It lasted by showing it could meet problems without twisting them. There was tension in the space, though nobody said it outright. The unease came not from differing views, but from what it meant. Once facts were said clearly, they could not be taken back or reshaped. And recognized that worry without giving into it. She pointed out that lasting effects were not something coming later. They were here now. The situation being discussed had already happened. The only decision left was if recognition would come from honesty or from planning. History, she said softly, seldom looked kindly on the second. As they moved to the practical side of who would share the news and did not volunteer right away, she let the topic sit. In that gap, the choice became clear without words. Her trustworthiness in tough institutional times was known not just in the family but outside as well. She was seen as neither overly emotional nor guarding herself, a quality that was crucial now. When she accepted the task, it came with conditions. The words would be accurate and limited. They would skip any guessing completely. They would not hint at later information or possible changes, and they would be said without showing feelings outwardly. Hardship, and maintained, did not need extra details to be grasped. Prince William showed agreement with a simple nod. That motion meant more than words could. It indicated not just going along with the approach, but accepting the deeper change it stood for. This was not about keeping things easy anymore. It was about stopping more damage. With that, the session ended. There were no final comments, no efforts to comfort. The way ahead had become sharply defined. Princess, and would deliver the message. The family would support her words fully, and any results that came would be faced without changes. As they exited the room, there was no feeling of ease. Ease would suggest things were settled, and they were not. What there was instead was determination. The hardship had not started in that place, but its recognition would start there, guided by a standard Princess had set and would not allow to shift. The announcement no one expected to face. The verification did not come as a big reveal. It came as a closing point. That difference was vital to Princess and who demanded the family deal with it without gentle terms. What they received was not an abrupt change, but the final stage of a process that had been developing quietly under careful watch and limits. The documents were exact and without sentiment. They described a course that could no longer be viewed hopefully. Health evaluations that once allowed for flexibility had now aligned. What was still unknown was not the result, but how long it would take. And even that unknown had shrunk enough to remove any false ideas. Princess asked for the full history of events to be gone over from the start, not because she did not know it, but to ensure complete accuracy. From years in service, she had learned that unclear points, even accidental ones, turned into problems once shared outside. If they were going to talk openly, every term would be checked against private knowledge. As the sequence was recounted, the mood in the room shifted slightly. Earlier periods, once seen as hopeful caution, now appeared as delays. Choices that seemed wise then were revealed as short-term covers from what was coming. No one there could avoid seeing that optimism had been asked to do more than it should. The matter involved a key person whose position went well beyond family ties. This was not just private sadness. It affected succession, public expectations, and the core of the monarchy. The effects spread out, impacting close connections and the speed at which duties would shift to others. Prince William took this in quietly. He knew things were grave, but the presentation removed any last cushions. This was not about getting ready for a potential tomorrow anymore. It was about facing that tomorrow on conditions they did not set. The separation between private existence and official roles shrank even more then. King Charles spoke softly, selecting words thoughtfully, showing both his background and weariness. He admitted that past decisions aimed to keep things stable. There had been real faith that privacy helped kindness. What he saw now, with clear struggle, was that privacy had hit its end. Princess, and replied not with blame but with a new perspective. She said directly that privacy had become misrepresentation. The longer facts stayed hidden, the worse their release would hurt. Waiting was not protecting anyone now. It was adding to the harm from quiet. This was the turning emotional point in the session. The change was not sudden, but it was firm. What started as review became acceptance. The hardship was no longer distant. It had form, path, and effects that would not wait for readiness. And stressed that public words could not hint at possible reversal. Doing so would create wrong expectations, and wrong expectations, she said, were unkindness hidden as care. The seriousness of this sank in gradually. For a family used to shaping views, realizing some facts could not be shaped was deeply disturbing. Yet, no one contested it. The details, once said, had their own power. The last topic in that part was not if the information would be given, but how to give it without lessening its truth or increasing suffering, and she clarified that careful limits, not comforting words, would guide it. People did not need soothing. They needed truth. By the time the talk ended, the full impact of the news had been taken in. It was met not with breakdown, but with lasting determination. They knew this time would shape not just the near future, but how the family was seen ethically for years. Effects within the royal household. The results of recognition started appearing even before words were shared publicly. In the home, the mood changed in subtle but clear ways. Talks became slower, actions more thoughtful. There was a feeling that all knew they were on the brink of something that could not be undone. For some in the family, the session made them face worries they had kept separate. For others, it verified thoughts they had avoided saying. The common feeling was not surprise, but openness. The gap between expecting and accepting had vanished. Prince William pulled back from sight in the time after, not to escape, but because it was needed. People near him later said he was adjusting as it happened. The duties he had trained for now felt closer, no longer ideas, no longer far off. Their pressure was right there and deeply felt. King Charles stayed in view, though less talkative than normal. His talks with staff were careful, centered on keeping things going rather than calming fears. He knew leading in such times meant calm, not emotion. His manner told those paying attention something key. The organization would hold together under honest strain. Princess, and now tasked with sharing, shifted to a focused state. She examined proposed texts with intense care. Every line was checked not for sound, but for what it might let others assume. She turned down wording that suggested openings where there were none, and warned against phrases that could spark guesses by what they left out. In the family, differences across generations showed more. Those with long experience and natural caution found the quick pace hard. They had learned time could help. Younger ones saw time here as working against them. Private talks brought up ongoing views on openness and change. These were not fights, but reflections. Past choices were looked at again under current light. Some admitted quietly that care had become evasion. Others saw that pushes for transparency had prices not fully weighed. Princess, and dealt with these strains in a later small meeting. She explained that differing opinions were not betrayal, but varying approaches would harm. After the words went out, there could be no mixed messages inside. They would present unity outside, even if feelings inside were still sorting. The waves reached past close family. Key workers changed plans without notice. Procedures once just ideas were put in place quietly. The system adapted not with panic but with measured response. This was not disorder. It was serious weight. As night came, a waiting feeling covered the home. The final text was set. The moment chosen. Nothing left to discuss. Everyone knew, once said, the words would change things forever. No one thought saying it would reduce future pain, but they shared the view that not saying it would damage faith in ways that could not heal. The family had moved from guarding to owning. The hardship was not made by speaking. It was there already, pushing against quiet. What was new was choosing to face it directly without cover. And with that decision, there was no going back to pretending ignorance. The words that shifted it all. Choosing Princess and to speak openly was not just tradition. It was planned, intentional, based on knowing how trust works when it is tested. In the family, there was silent agreement that no one else could share without it being seen through lenses of expectation, pity, or doubt. Anne's known bluntness was not just helpful. It was essential. The announcement was set for mid-morning, planned with care, but without the typical setup for big royal news. No early tips to selected reporters. No off-record comforts from sources. Princess, and demanded the words stand alone, without extra layers. If facts were to be shared, they would come without buffers. In the time before, Anne looked over the last version by herself. She turned down help from media staff, preferring quiet and room. This was not rebellion, but focus. She knew every term would be examined for both content and purpose. Any unclear part, even unintended, would seem like dodging. The text was simple, almost plain. It started straight, without thanks or requests for sympathy, and named the situation clearly, stating the family faced developments that had gone past previous hopes. She noted the severity without exaggeration, picking directness over ease. What was left out mattered as much as what was included. No dates given, No guesses presented as options, no wording that could spark wrong hopes or comforts. She did not offer more information later. She did not say things were being considered. Leaving those out was on purpose. Adding them would not be truthful. And delivered it steadily, her voice even and plain. There was no obvious feeling shown, but no coldness either. The seriousness came through holding back rather than letting go. Viewers knew without thinking that this was not acting. It was recognition. At one moment, and stopped shortly, not to steady herself, but for accuracy. She explained the family chose to speak now because quiet no longer helped anyone, including the public. That line, said plainly, meant more than any sadness could. It presented the words not as giving in but as duty. The response was quick and deep. Soon, the exact wording spread worldwide, repeated fully on many sites. Experts pointed out no soft terms. Observers noted no story shaping. For people used to shape royal messages, the directness was unsettling. But that unsettlement rebuilt trust. By not guiding feelings and let facts stand, people were not told how to react. They were told what was. In the home, the delivery time marked moving from waiting to results. No celebration when and finished, no shared ease. They knew recognition was not a finish. It was a starting point. King Charles learned right after it ended. He asked for no changes or explanations. He took it as done. His reaction from those there was quiet support. The family had met the need, not the easy path. Prince William, viewing privately, reportedly stayed quiet for minutes after. For him, the words meant the gap between now and his future duties had shrunk. What was said openly would now guide all private choices. Public reactions changed fast. First surprise turned to thoughtful review. There was little anger, surprisingly little guessing. The directness seemed to limit excess. By stating clearly without extras, it reduced room for rumors. Health specialists, experts on the Constitution, and writers from various fields noted the rare openness. Some asked if waiting had been too long. Others said speaking sooner might only have changed when the facing happened, not the result. Most agreed the handling showed seriousness over planning, and then did not add more after. She skipped interviews. No extra notes. Her part, as she saw it, was finished. More words would lessen the sharpness she created. In following days, the words were cited often as a key shift, not just for what they said, but for what they showed: readiness to admit limits, refusal to swap truth for ease. For Princess, and the job was never about controlling response. It was about setting a boundary between quiet and honesty. Once over it, no going back. The words did not fix the hardship they named. They did something lasting. They changed how the family and public connected by showing that when needed, openness would win over protection. In that change, the organization gained a different feel, perhaps more vulnerable, but more believable. What comes next after hardship? Following the words, there was no going back to usual ways. The normal return often mentioned after royal difficulties did not fit here. What Princess and had stated did not create disorder, but it changed the family's inner pace in permanent ways. A boundary had been passed, not just by events, but by decision. And decisions shared openly reshape all that comes after. In the home, the first shift was a new quiet, not the tense holding back before recognition, but a calmer, more intentional one. Talks grew less frequent and more focused. Choices once put off were handled straight. The idea of time as a cushion was over. For Princess, and the time after was about careful guidance, not being seen. After speaking once, she stepped back on purpose. No interviews to explain, no gentle comments to calm viewers or writers. Her view was straightforward. Truth said clearly did not need repeating to stay strong. Adding more would allow changes to meaning, weakening what was said. King Charles grasped this naturally. In the days after, he avoided public moves to offset the announcement's weight. No unexpected outings, no planned events to show ongoing strength. His holding back sent its own signal. The monarchy would not act out toughness. It would live it quietly. Planning sped up, not with rush, but with certainty. Ideas once backups were updated and improved. Duties were quietly reassigned without explanation. Those inside saw the change right away. Power did not jump, but it tilted ahead. Prince William's part started evolving in noticeable ways, even without official word. He attended more meetings. His role and future plans grew deeper. The line between helping and heading thinned, not from desire but need. The years ahead had come nearer, bringing a seriousness no training fully prepared for. For the broader family, the recognition made them readjust ties. Some connections grew stronger under shared truth, others pulled not from arguments, but from quiet awareness that directions were splitting. Hardship clarifies what matters, and not all reached the same views. Public reactions kept developing. Early reviews turned to deeper thought. No ongoing words from the palace gave room for calm, rare in public sadness. Without constant input, guessing slowed. The original clear words left little space for added stories. Coverage changed too. Instead of seeking bits, media placed the time in history. Links were made to past times of permanent shift. What set this apart, many said, was not the difficulty, but the response. No effort to turn truth into shows of strength. The family let facts be without extras. That decision had effects past image. It changed what people expected. The public, spoken to directly, adjusted their view of the organization. Kindness took over from doubt in many places, not because things were fixed, but because they were named truly. Inside, this was seen with careful positivity. Trust lost is hard to regain fast, but it can steady. Princess Anne did not rebuild it with appeal or feeling. She steadied it with reliability. That difference was crucial for those leading through what was coming. The personal cost in the family stayed mostly hidden as usual. Recognition did not reduce sorrow. It just lifted the need to act as if sorrow was not near. Private times gained more safeguard now that hiding was not protection. In some respects, honesty made room for privacy instead of taking it. As time passed, the lack of big development stood out. No information contradicted the words. No unnamed inputs tried to soften meaning. The family maintained consistency. That focus strengthened the weight of what was shared. Quiet here continued truth rather than evasion. Longer effects started appearing softly. Talks on updates gained importance. The line between private and public roles was reviewed not as ideas but real actions. Choices delayed from worry about upset were thought over again. It became evident stability did not rely on hiding. Princess Anne's part in this adjustment was quiet but strong. Though she spoke little publicly after, her impact showed in style and method. She pushed for less talking, not more, for directness over comfort, for steady approach over quick responses. Those ideas guided later steps. When schedules changed, they changed without notice. When duties moved, they moved without comment. The organization advanced without claiming advance meant hope. For Prince William, this time began a new preparation phase. No longer distant, his coming duties felt real. He handled the change without show, led by knowing leadership here showed in calm rather than statements. People watching from afar felt this change, even without clear signs. Experts saw a shift in feel not just in messages but in overall manner. The monarchy seemed less staged, more intentional. That was not liked by all, but respected by many. The hardship princess, and named did not end the tale. It reshaped it. What came next was not fixing but adjusting. The family went from expecting to accepting, from readying to doing. In the end, the lasting result of the time was not the information, but the example set. When facts required it, the organization would not conceal with words or postpone with steps. It would state clearly once and support what was stated. That decision did not simplify what lay ahead, but it made the path sharper. And sharpness in times of permanent shift is a strength of its own.